All right, what's up, folks? Welcome to Guerrilla Radio episode 17, back with Coach Susie. So we're going to tackle a topic that Susie's very familiar with because of her background, but it comes up consistently, and that's just this idea of carb loading, right? People talk about they got a 5K or half marathon, and they say, how should I carb load, especially if, let's say we're trying to take a more paleo approach, or if you're on Susie's weight loss program or our challenge program, we're removing all grains. We want to talk about what that actually looks like. So let's jump into basically, let's kind of start with the premise behind carb loading, right? Yeah. So the idea basically is I fill everything, all of my joints up, or my muscles up with glycogen or carbohydrates, which is going to better fuel me for the workout. And quick fuel,
yeah.
Right? So let's talk about how it usually works. So let's break down the three areas. Susie broke this down pretty well for me earlier. So let's start with these three areas and kind of run with that.
Because it definitely is going to be individualized. Totally. I think it is something that is not going to be across the board. Just like diet and nutrition is not exactly the same for every single person. Carb loading is going to, there's all different, variations of it, especially depending on what you're looking at and what type of level you're working out at or what your goals are. So somebody that is in weight loss or somebody that comes to see me and is looking to lose quite a bit of weight, and they're going through this very detailed process of kind of teaching their body that what type of metabolism they should use. When they're looking to try and teach their body to burn fat for fuel, the last thing you want to do is keep throwing some carbs in there and loading up on carbs, because it's just too confusing and your body's too vulnerable that you're never going to get into that really deep fat burning and deeper fat storage and see weight loss and be successful. So when you're looking at weight loss, especially because usually you're at higher risk for chronic diseases and those kind of things, and carbs and grains are one of the biggest things that increase your risk for chronic disease. So that is going to be one time that you really won't ever use it. When you get into some of these other competing aspects where you're going into casual competing, so maybe just everyday working out, or maybe it's even something where you're going and you're training for a 5K or a half marathon or something like that, or a longer distance than you're typically used to doing, then there's going to be some variations of it, but it's also what you've taught your body to do previously. So like in the Best Shape Challenge and in the True Weight Loss Program, we practice intermittent fasting. So most people are going to be very efficient with burning fat for fuel, and it actually can be more beneficial to work out while fasting. So instead of trying to teach your body, okay, use this glucose while you have it, but then get back into fat storage, sometimes when you're just casually competing or doing shorter races, it's actually not necessarily beneficial.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say?
Basically, yeah, I think that's the big distinction that I know you're about to touch on it too, but when we're talking about the even need for carb loading, right, a sub 30 minute, even sub 45 minute event, which most people are going to fall into in their 5Ks, probably not even necessary, right? Maybe a little, you talked about a little protein, maybe a little whey protein pre. But
one of the biggest things that they've recommended just in general is going to be their nutrients called SAF, so stress activated food nutrients. So things like, and keep in mind, good quality does make a difference. So good quality whey organic grass-fed protein can actually be more beneficial than doing any carb loading or anything else. And it also can help boost your metabolism for up to 24 hours after you finish working out. So just something as simple as a small protein shake.
Yeah. So if you're looking to run a 5K, maybe the better answer is something like good grass-fed protein beforehand, as opposed to one big plate of spaghetti the night before.
Right.
Because true carb loading for our legitimate long-term endurance athletes looks different.
Days beforehand.
Yeah. They're starting 5 days out, and there's a structured process to it. And now that legitimately has some research that supports that working. For the average of us, I think the point Susie's making, for most of us, we're falling in this realm. Right? We're running a couple 5Ks a year, maybe a little bit more, but we're not doing multiple long-distance marathons and triathlons.
Yeah, and even so, when you really look into some of the research on carb loading, even the people that do carb load, like you still have to, it's not that you just carb load the night before, like he said, but it's not that you just carb load the night before and then you're good to go for the next day. You actually, for the long distance stuff, and if you're running a half marathon or a marathon or triathlons or whatever, that you actually end up needing to replenish during too. If you're wanting to function on glucose for fuel throughout that workout, and the entire time, you do have to make sure that you've got, that's why they have those little gel packs and things like that. It's glucose basically. So it's keeping you going throughout the race. So, and what the other thing that I read, which was interesting too, is that typically the people that do carb load, they don't actually train that way. A lot of times they still train in fat burning, or train with intermittent fasting and those kind of things, but maybe they just carb load for the big event or the big race, but they don't necessarily do it for all of their training prior to.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're doing the same thing. It's key, and you function well. Your energy's higher. Your hunger's under control. All of that with intermittent fasting. So most people stay in intermittent fasting and they recover better and all kinds of stuff. So I think the thing that you have to be careful with too with carbs and grains is the inflammatory.
Yeah, you still get inflammatory response
too. Yeah. So if you're doing that repeatedly too often, and it can. If it's not done well, it can lead to more chronic issues, chronic disease, and they even talk about gut issues and things like that as well.
Yep.
So it's not something that you want to do very loosely without knowing exactly what individual side you should be taking.
Yeah, and so what kind of going with that as well on race day too, because some people always ask, what do I have before? If I'm running a 5K at 9 a.m., what do I have before? The main thing I say don't do is don't ever introduce anything you haven't had before, right? Don't think, well, this will help me just for today, though I've never had it. I actually just had a conversation today, I hope she's watching, but somebody just did that. They were trying to run a 5-miler a couple weeks back, and they entered in a sandwich with some Red Bull, something they don't ever eat, but they just thought the carbs and the caffeine would help.
Yeah.
It was disastrous halfway through the run. I'll let her finish her story some other time, but it's not good.
That would be disastrous.
That would be disastrous.
I know it.
And I did something, my very first CrossFit competition, I did something very similar. It included some dairy and coffee mixture that I thought was going to help. It was not good. So you never introduce something you are not accustomed to doing. You would train as you fight, so to speak. So you need to be knowing what you're putting in your body is going to work because you've done that before.
Yeah.
All right. And so recap what Susie's talking about, 3 categories. If you're talking about should I carb load for some sort of event, if you're in this, I don't know, maybe 30 pounds plus to lose, maybe might be a good place to start. If you're above that, not even on the table, doesn't really need to happen. Casual competitor, again, probably doesn't even need to happen, especially following an intermittent fasting model like we both kind of follow. Stick with letting your body learn to use fats, maybe add in a little bit of, like I said, that grass-fed whey protein pre-workout to help fuel that. But you probably need to go there. If you're stepping into this territory, if you're a legitimate long-distance elite endurance competitor, research supports the fact that this can be beneficial to you, but it is a multi-day process and it is a lot more intricate than just a plate full of spaghetti.
And good quality carbs too.
Yes.
I mean, good quality food does make a difference.
Cool. If you got any questions about carb loading, drop it in the comments and we'll see you next time.